Alrighty guys, thanks for joining me. This is your host ID Jester. We're going to finish up our introductory / tutorial / help video series on the standard combat series, specifically talking about Panzer battles, the 11th Panzer on the Char River, and the rules that are associated with this module specifically. Hopefully it'll give you a good idea of the way the standard combat series works, but of course each module is going to have specific rules associated with that one, so be sure to check through your module to see, because as I said throughout this series, not all modules are exactly the same. They're going to have some specific rules associated with them. For example, we won't have in this module, we won't have any paratrooper landings or anything like that, but in Days of Days, obviously, we're going to have paratrooper rules on that as well. And if everyone really enjoys this series, I would consider doing a specific standard combat series for Days of Days, if that's something that people are interested in. Anyways, we got a few phases left to talk about. We got the exploitation phase, we have the supply phase, and we have the DG removal phase. And then we're going to talk a little bit of strategies and just tips and tricks on things. And then we'll wrap this up. And we'll see you here in just a second. Alrighty guys, so right after combat and the combat phase, we're going to go right into the exploitation phase. And as we talked about throughout this series, units that have a yellow bar at the bottom of them are considered exploitation eligible units. Those units that do not have any yellow bar are not exploit capable units. So just keep that in mind. There's just a couple rules when we're talking about exploitation. There might be some specific scenario rules that will say which units are able to do exploitation or not, so be sure to check your scenario rules for that. And also the big thing with exploitation and the exploitation phase is units that start adjacent to an enemy unit are not eligible for the exploitation phase. So in this case, with these units here, this unit would not be able because he's not exploit capable. This unit also is not capable because he's adjacent to an enemy unit. This unit would be available to do exploitation. And the exploitation phase is going to be handled very similar to the movement phase, where you're going to be able to move your units and then declare an overrun on an enemy unit. Only units that are able to participate in the exploitation phase are able to do this. So if I was able to move this unit into this hex here, this unit would be would get the attack, but he would not get any bonus from this unit here. So positioning of your units and outlining the positioning of them and getting them prepared for the different phases of the standard combat series is ultra important. So that's pretty much the exploitation phase. You're going to be able to, get your units that are stacked together and move them adjacent to enemy units, and then proceed with overrun attacks. And you're going to follow the regular combat procedure. We're going to add up all of your attack values. So in this case, it'd be a 6 against a 5 defense. So in this case, it'd be a 1-to-1 attack. And you would handle it just like combat. If this unit took a step loss and then had to retreat a hex, then these exploitation units could enter into that hex and their exploitation phase would be over. So pretty much exactly like the movement / combat phase for exploitation. Alright, now let's talk about the supply phase. So during the supply phase, the phasing player is going to check all of his units to determine if there is a supply line that they can trace back to their supply source. A lot of times it will be a certain edge board, so like for the Germans, maybe they're over here coming in from the top of the screen, and maybe that's north of there. So it is, the scenario might say something like the north edge. So in this case, the German units can trace the supply back to the north edge and would be perfectly in supply. If the Russian player was the phasing player, let's assume they maybe their supply source was down on the south edge of the board, he would have to trace a line of supply to the south edge. Now, enemy zones of control will block supply. So this unit does have a zone of control because he does have at least a 1 attack factor. So that unit does exert control into this hex, and this unit also exerts into this hex. So this unit would be considered out of supply if the phasing player was the Russian player. If the German player is the phasing player, you're just checking the German units. And in this case, if the Russian player was the phasing player, you're going to check all the Russian units. And in this case, this unit would be marked with an out of supply marker. Now, each game module is going to have different effects on what happens with units that are out of supply. So be sure to check your module rules, what happens when units are marked out of supply, and any specific rules about tracing supply. A lot of times, if you have a map that has water, how does the supply go across the water? Do you have to go across the road, or can you trace over some of the smaller streams, or how does your module handle the different supply sources? Now keep in mind that supply, we talked about both units can exert a zone of control into a hex, and for combat or any of those results, advance after combat, it doesn't matter. The only thing that does matter is with supply checks. So if the phasing player is the Russian player, this unit here exerts a zone of control into this hex, and this unit also, but for supply purposes, you can trace through basically your friendly units will nullify that zone of control for that enemy unit. Since the only time it does it is just for supply checks. So in this case, this Russian unit would be able to trace supply into this hex, and then towards the south end of the map, and he would not be marked with out of supply. So having your friendly units in really good positions to help you keep your units from being out of supply is very helpful and very useful for that. So again, the only time that you nullify an enemy zone of control is for a supply check. And this is not any of the different phases, but let's just talk really quickly about hex control. A lot of times you'll be tasked with securing certain objective hexes. So for example, in this scenario, maybe you're tasked with securing this town hex or village hex. To get control of a hex, you actually have to enter into the hex to take control of it, and the last unit that is in that hex has control of it. You cannot just exert zone of control into that hex to capture it. You have to physically be the last unit into that hex. So if the Russian player was attacking, the German player was attacking the Russian player and forced a retreat, and then the German player was able to advance into that hex, they would have control of that hex at that point, and then maybe the Russian player attacks the German player and forces the German player back out. Maybe he has to retreat 2 spaces, and the Russian can then advance in, and control of the hex can go back and forth throughout the scenario, and it's whoever was the last side that actually entered into the hex that will have control of it. So just wanted to clarify some of those rules out there. Again, check your module specific directions on any rules on hex control, because like I said, a lot of scenarios will list a certain objective, and specifically when we deal with our scenario here, we're going to have several locations that the German player needs to secure to be successful in his in this scenario. So we've kind of gone over the general turn sequence that would happen. Again, you're going to draw an activation chit, and that side is going to be the phasing player. They're going to get to activate all or some of their units based upon the activation chit and what that chit does. Of course, if you draw a dummy chit, that doesn't activate anything, and it's basically like your side is passed and it goes back to your opponent. Then we talked about the barrage phase, the road march phase, the movement phase, the combat phase, the exploitation phase, the supply phase, and then the DG removal phase. In that case, for DG removal, you're just going to remove all of the units that are marked with a DG marker. So now let's talk a little bit about some of the strategies slash I don't know. I don't want to call them tips and tricks, but these are things that you should be thinking about as you are taking your turn and positioning your different units and such. So we're going to assume that in this case the Germans pulled out the 11th Panzer Division chit, and so he's going to be able to activate all of the units that have the white bar on them, which are most of the units here. And we'll just say that this is the current setup going on. So one of the things you really want to do, as we talked about throughout this video series, is your units, even though you're only using them through one phase, they can actually get 3 different attacks in. And we're going to show you how that's done by giving you an example here. So in this case, the German player is going to activate his units, and he's going to choose his units, and whatever format he wants. We're going to go through the barrage phase. We'll say that the German player doesn't have any barrages that he wants to participate in, and he doesn't have any units that are going to road march. So we're going to go right into the movement phase at this point. So in the movement phase, he can select any of his units to move, and again, he's going to be using the movement point factors on to the right-hand side of the counters. So in this case, this unit here has got 12 movement points. And so what the German player is going to do is he's going to try and get his units in good position to use his stack of units here to do overruns, and then set up for combat, and then set up for exploitation combat. And we're going to try and use this unit for all 3 of these purposes. So what the German player might do for the movement phase is he might move this unit for 1 movement point to go there, and then another movement point to go there, plus 2 movement points for moving adjacent to an enemy. So that's going to be 4 movement points, and at that point, the German's going to be done moving this unit. And the reason he might want to do that first is because now if he attacks with this unit here, it's going to force this unit to have to retreat from that unit and possibly cause this unit to take extra step losses because of a retreat. So in this case, he's done moving that unit, and now he's going to activate this stack of units. Again, only units that are stacked together can overrun, which is ultra important. We're going to talk about that in a minute when we go through the road march phase. But he's going to spend 1 movement point to move his units here, and another movement point to move that there, plus 2 for moving adjacent. That's 4 movement points. All 3 of these units have plenty of movement points. And at that point, he's going to declare an overrun on this hex here. And he's going to add up his attack value, which is a 5, a 3, and a 3. So he's going to end up having 11. And the defender is going to have a 3. So 3 to 11 is 4 to 1. And then we're going to check our terrain chart to see if there's any adjustments. In this case, it's a clear hex, so there's going to be no adjustments on that. And he's going to be on the 4 to 1 column. And what we're going to do is we're going to roll 2 dice. And I rolled a 7 there. And what we do is we look at the 4 1, and we look at the 7. In this case, it's a D1, R1. So it's a D1, R1. So in this case, this unit is flipped over because it took a step loss, and then it needs to retreat 1 space. So in this case, the unit has to move away from the attacking units. No matter where he moves, he's going to end up taking a step loss because he's going to be in an enemy zone of control. So that was a really wise move by the Germans to put that blocking unit that came flanked in from behind. And that's going to cause this unit to take another step loss because when it retreats, it's going to be in an enemy zone of control, and this unit is going to be eliminated. Now, the result was a retreat 1, which means that this unit can then advance after combat and enter into that hex, and then he is going to be done. I'm sorry, he is going to yes, that unit will be done. So that's a example of what possibly could have happened. But let's change things up just a little bit because I want to make things a little bit more interesting here. So in this case, this unit was here. This unit moves up, and in this time, instead of rolling a 7, we're going to roll a 9. That's what we're going to roll. We're going to roll a 9. All right. So on a 9, we have on the 4 to 1 column, we have a D1 R2. So in this case, the enemy has to retreat 2 spaces after taking a step loss. And the same thing's going to end up happening. This unit is going to take a step loss from the damage, and then he's going to take a step loss. Actually, no, he's going to move there, actually. There, that's what he's going to do. He's going to move right there. Why not? All right, so maybe just a little bit slightly different setup for you guys, but same basic premise now. So now this guy can actually, let's see, it was a D2. So this unit is going to take a step loss, and he's going to retreat 2 spaces. So the German player can then move in, and he can advance 2 spaces as well. Now, should he advance 2 spaces or not? Well, the next phase coming up is combat, and you can only do combat when you're adjacent. So he should definitely try to advance, if he can, adjacent to an enemy. So this is still the movement phase, remember. He did an overrun. He damaged this unit, forced it to retreat. It moved down the way, and now this unit was able to move into that hex that they vacated and still move up adjacent to enemy units. We now move to the next phase, and that's going to be the combat phase. So the combat phase, actually, you know what? Let me take this move back for just a second here. Let's see. All right, so Yeah, he will move up there. That's fine. All right, so I won't take that move back. All right, so now we move on to the combat phase. And in this case, the combat, what he's going to do is, knowing that the exploitation phase is coming up, he wants to be able to use his units again for the exploitation phase. If he was to take all of these units and attack this unit and force it to retreat or take a step loss or whatever, he would still be adjacent to this unit in the exploitation phase, so he wouldn't be able to do that. So in this case, what the German player is going to do is he's going to assign this unit here on top to attack this unit here. So it's a 3 attack versus a 3 defense, and it's going to be a 1-to-1. And let's say he rolls a 10 on the 1-to-1 column. He rolled a 10, which is going to be a defender retreat. So in this case, this defender is going to retreat a space, and this unit is not going to advance into there. He's going to stay where he's at. So that unit attacked. Now we have these other 2 units. These top 2 units has an attack value of 5 and an attack value of 3 for 8. 8 to 5 is... Oh, I need to get my calculator out again now. Calculator, hang on. Let's look at what that value is going to be. 8 divided by 5 is 1.6. So 1.6 is going to round up to 2 to 1 odds. And again, we would check the terrain chart. There's, in this case, there's no special terrain, no adjustments. So in this case, he's on the 2-to-1 column. And in this case, we're going to say that he rolls a, we'll say he rolls a 9. That's fine. 2-to-1. Yeah, on a 9, that's a... actually, we're going to give him a 10 again because it would give us a better example. So if he rolls a 10, on the 10, it is a step reduction and a retreat of 1. So in this case, he takes a step loss and has to retreat. Then the combat phase would be done. We move on to the exploitation phase. These 3 units are exploitation capable units. They are not adjacent to an enemy unit, so they can participate in the exploitation phase. And in this case, they're going to move up here for 1 movement point, plus 2 for moving adjacent to an enemy unit. This guy couldn't retreat there. He would have to retreat there because that would be a zone of control there. So let's say he retreated there instead. But in this case, this unit is going to move up. And during the exploitation phase, he's going to try to overrun this hex. And that is going to be a total of 5 and 3 is 11 versus 3, which is again a 4-to-1. And on a 4-to-1, we'll say he rolls a 6. There we go. Rolls a 6. And that's going to be a DR1. And this case, this unit is going to retreat 1 more time. And this unit could advance. So you can see that through the process here, through the movement phase, through the combat phase, and then through the exploitation phase, these 1 units were able to wreak mass casualties and causing all kinds of problems for the Russians because he was able to position his units to use these units in all 3 of those phases. So it's very important that you use your units to the best of their capabilities, and being able to attack 3 different times, once during or overrun during the movement phase, do a combat phase, and then do an overrun in the exploitation phase. These 3 units were able to do quite a bit of damage and force retreats from the enemies based on the dice rolls. Now, you won't always get that lucky, if you're, rolling super high. But that brings a really good point up that we want to talk about when we're talking about strategy, right? So one of the things is this unit here. If we go rewind a little bit, and this time we're going to put some strategy in for the Russian player. So that we're in the movement phase. So in the movement phase, the German player decides to activate these units. In fact, you know what? He's going to, he activates this unit first. He's going to bring them in behind this unit like that and cause this unit, if he tries to retreat, cause extra step losses. Now, he then activates these units, paying the proper movement points to move up here and then declare an overrun. Again, we're going back to the movement phase. And in this case, he is a 11 to 10, so that's a 1-to-1. And in this case, we'll say he rolls a D1R1. A D1R1. We'll say he rolled really good, and he rolled a 12. So on a 12, on the 1-to-1 column is a D1R1. So that means the strongest unit, in this case, they're both equal, so he's going to take it off of this unit here, which is slightly weaker. And then he has a retreat of 1. Well, remember that you can cancel retreats by taking an extra step loss. And this is not, you can choose the unit that takes the step loss. This is not part of the rule that states during combat your strongest unit takes the first hit and then every other unit takes a hit before any unit takes a second hit. When you're doing step losses to cancel retreats, you can choose the unit. So in this case, you can choose this unit and cancel the retreat. Now, even if this unit wasn't there, let's say that German wasn't even there to begin with, this unit could obviously just move back here and be in position. But is that a better move than taking a step loss and staying here? Now, what's the advantages of doing that? Well, the advantage is knowing that if this unit, we took a step loss from this unit, right? We've now left this unit adjacent to these units, and we know the exploitation phase is coming up. And what we've done here is we've locked these guys in. They can no longer do anything in the exploitation phase because they're adjacent to an enemy unit. So by taking this step loss, these guys here, this 2, 3, 12, might have saved some of his other stronger units from taking exploitation phase. So if this guy ends up, retreating back here, then these units can, again, during the exploitation phase, come up and try to do an overrun on these guys and, maybe do more damage than you would lose by taking rid of this 2-3 unit. So we lost this 2-3 unit to cancel the retreat. But if we don't do that, then these stack can come over after these 5-5s units. So it's much better for the German player just to lose the 2-3 than lose one of these 5-5 units. By staying adjacent to him, he cancels this unit's exploitation phase. So hopefully that makes a little bit of sense for you guys. I'm trying to give you some good examples of what to think about and how things might come about as you're thinking about, what should I do, which units should I attack with, which units should I just move, and thinking about the phases that are coming up and preparing yourself for those phases coming up. Another thing I want to really kind of talk about really quickly here is the road march feature in the game. And when I went through the video yesterday and looked at road marching and stuff, it seemed like, oh my gosh, getting all these guys extra movement seems just way overpowered, because you're basically going to allow these units to move up. But here's the most important thing to remember about that is, yes, you're going to be able to get your units moved on the map and into position, but unfortunately, they're all going to be in individual hexes, right? So when this unit moves up, he can move up, and he can, let's see, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3. So he can move up to here and still not be within 3 spaces of an enemy. Now the next unit that road marches can come down, but he's got to stop here because you can't be stacked, you can't enter into a friendly hex either. And the next unit that moves down is going to have to stop there, and then the next unit that moves down is going to be able to stop, it's going to have to stop there. So yes, we got some movement, right? We got some movement, and even, you know, let's say there's a longer road that comes down, we got all that extra movement. But now in the movement phase, right, we have all of our units individually stacked. So when you activate a unit in the movement phase, it's not like I can go, oh, okay, I'm going to go there and pick up this guy, and I'm going to go here and pick up this guy, and I'm going to go here and pick up this guy. No, each unit has to start in as a stack to do any kind of overruns. Now this unit could try and overrun by himself. He could, you know, during the movement phase, he could try to move up and then try and do a overrun, except for, nope, that guy's in a village hex, so we'll say he's over here. So in this case, he could try to do it singular, but he can't go with any of his buddies. So I guess what I'm trying to show you is even though you get that extra movement, it doesn't really help you. Now during the movement phase, right? So in the movement phase, you can, you know, move up all your units, and you can stack them up nice and good like that, and you know, move them up, and then you're ready to go in the combat phase. And maybe this guy comes over here, and then when the combat phase happens, then you can do combat and force this unit to retreat, and then do an overrun with these guys. But the road movement, the road march is only going to allow you to just stack, you know, just think of a big, huge, long column of all of your guys moving down the road. They don't get to stack up together. They have to stack individually, because you can't enter a friendly hex, and you can't come within 3 hexes of an enemy unit either. And don't forget to do overruns. Some hexes prevent overruns as well. And in this case, I believe a village hex. Actually, let's see. Overrun allowed no woods, no swamp, no village, no city, and no balka. Yeah, so you can't overrun guys in cities anyways. So just wanted to bring that up. And of course, we talked about this a little bit ago. The last thing I really wanted to kind of talk about is, when is it a better option to cancel your retreat by taking step losses, as we just looked at just a minute ago with our units here. If we had some German or some Russian units back here, and we had this exploitation stack, and we're in the combat phase, and he ends up taking a we'll say he forces him to retreat DR1, right? So in this case, this unit would have to retreat, but it might be better for this unit just to take the step loss and prevent that retreat, because that way these units won't be able to do any exploitation combat. So that's super, super important as well, to kind of think about that. Is it better for me just to take a step loss? And don't forget, you will have to take a step loss for every spot that you don't retreat. So if you end up taking a D2 result, or I'm sorry, an R2 result, which would force you to do 2 spaces, you can either take 1 space and take a step loss, or you would have to take 2 step losses. And if you end up taking 2 step losses and this unit's removed, then this unit can advance after combat anyways. So, but sometimes it might actually be better, especially if you have a weaker unit in there, like a already damaged unit, to take that extra step loss, stay adjacent to the enemy, so that these units can't use exploitation combat. So we're going to talk about that when we do our scenario overview, but I think that's pretty much everything I wanted to talk about the standard combat series. It's only 7 pages of rules, and then you usually have between 4 or 5 pages of module-specific rules that you got to read over and kind of digest. But hopefully this was able to get you started to understanding the basic concepts. What we're going to do now is we're actually going to investigate scenario, and we're going to talk about strategies first for the Soviets as the defender, and then we'll talk about strategies for the German player as the attacker, and we'll go over the specific rules of the scenario. And then what I thought I would do is actually play through the scenario for you guys and see how it goes, so you can see how it turns out. So hopefully this was a good introductory, again, kind of tutorial, kind of strategy. I want to give you guys something to think about, not just reading rules and saying, oh, okay. I want you to feel like there's you're learning something besides just the rules. You're learning the game concepts of the core mechanics, the core the kind of the stuff inside of the game that's not in the words, but kind of what do the words mean, and how does it adjust? How does that adjust? How the actual units and the system plays out on the map. So, anyways, I hope this was a good introductory for you. It's been good for me to kind of look through the rules, analyze them, and think about what I want to talk about and how I want to present it, because that way it makes me understand them a little bit better, and hopefully get it so that we have a good understanding of the core concepts. There's, I'm sure, some fine points that we're going to find out as we play through this scenario, and hopefully it'll be a good time. So next up, we'll do, like I said, we'll have a video. We'll talk maybe 10 or 15 minutes on defender and strategy, and what their game plan is, and then we'll do the same thing for the Germans as the attacker. We're going to be playing State Farm 79 and talk about the victory, how you get a success in this victory. And in this case, it's taking over the State Farm and these 2 hexes that are this village here of Seoskin. Seoskin? Hopefully that's how you pronounce that. So we'll see you in that episode. I appreciate everyone that stopped by and said all the kind words and really enjoyed this series. So we'll see you next time. Thanks for watching, guys.